Hello and welcome to Tech with Briley. Today we're going to be working with FlowiseAI and building some large language model based applications. We'll be taking the first steps in FlowiseAI. I don't have a project currently, but I have one that I was building in LangFlow, and we will port that over to FlowiseAI. Just briefly, it's a drag and drop programming environment where you drag blocks that send data to one another, and these blocks represent components like data stores, large language model interfaces, and chat output. It's written in JavaScript or TypeScript, so we're in the NPM ecosystem. So what I'll do is I'll just grab my Flowise folder in VS Code. We'll try to continue where we left off previously here. And I'll check our package JSON to see what version of Flowise we're using, 1.8.1. And they're installing it globally, but I think we're going to work with it in a local environment here. Let's see if we update it here. I'm basically comparing these large language model frameworks, application frameworks, for usability and stability. I have a few app ideas I would like to build and deploy. And currently, I was able to build my initial idea with LangFlow, the pre-release version, but I was running into a lot of issues with stability, and it's to be expected because LangFlow is currently alpha. So I'm going to step back from that project while they go through the alpha development process and refactoring some of their internal APIs, and hopefully that project will stabilize soon and have a 1.0 release. I'm looking forward to that. It's a good project overall. Meanwhile, Flowise, I did start working with Flowise previously and was able to make headway. So let's see, this I guess take a little bit. Let's hop over to the documentation. One of the challenges I faced with LangFlow is to deployment. There's only a couple of options that they have documented for easy deployment. I tried manually deploying it to DigitalOcean, and I followed their documentation and deployed it to the recommended platforms as well, with mixed results. It was a bit frustrating. But we do have some additional deployment options here. We won't look at deployment today. We'll just build a couple of flows. We'll continue building the flow I was working on previously. This is one of my primary platforms that I use for deploying cloud services, DigitalOcean. They're really great. Simple, affordable, focus on usability. I've tried, we use AWS at places I've worked and work. I tried using GCP, and I've also taken a look at Azure. The user experience is just kind of atrocious in those cloud environments. They're very complicated. All the concepts you need to know to even deploy a service, and the billing is in a lot of cases really opaque. And DigitalOcean is a breath of fresh air with that regard. You sort of reserve your resource, and you can scale horizontally. It'll auto scale, auto deploy, things like that. There's several options from the VPS droplets to DigitalOcean app platform that is sort of like a Heroku-like auto deployment approach. I highly recommend checking out DigitalOcean getting started. I know a lot of large companies, they do prefer to use these big cloud providers. So sometimes we're stuck with that, but I believe there's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome when we're working for those, and it's just the experience is really leaves a lot to be desired. We're also using Kubernetes. So anyway, there's a lot of deployment options, and then some of these more up and coming companies, for example, this Elastio. It's essentially your pricing is based on convenience. They give you a really quick way of deploying to different cloud providers, and I'm also looking closely at Hetzner because they're based in the European Union. But here you can deploy to DigitalOcean, and they just add some markup on top of the droplet. So here I would be paying DigitalOcean directly about $6 a month, so they're adding some estimated markup on top of that, which is reasonable. You know, these cloud providers are already priced pretty cheaply, and you get a decent amount of resources. Like this is enough to run a FlowiseAI deployment. So I will come back to that. Okay, so it looks like new minor version is available of NPM. All right, I haven't been in NPM ecosystem for so long, so I'll have to just remember how to do things. Open the terminal and run the project. Okay, so just this. FlowiseAI at latest. And I like this just transparent pricing. One of the detriments of the cloud service is the sort of the pricing structures. They get into every nook and cranny of your service and bill you for that. You know, every log entry, log storage, log persistence, that is, log search, indexing. You know, not just the inbound and outbound HTTP traffic, but down to the request numbers and very granular billings. What I'm observing, and it's then the prices skyrocket. And with the VPS approach, you don't really have to think about that kind of billing. You just sort of pay for a server and you use it. And honestly, in some cases, we're like majorly over provisioned. All right, so we got FlowiseAI. FlowiseAI is running for 2000. And I have my previous flows. Very cool. So what I did previously is load in, and they have a dark mode, I think, because light mode hurts my eyes just a little bit. I'm getting suntan here. Yeah, thank you. Cool. So yeah, let's just get familiar with this. Here's the previous FlowiseAI build. And I like their interface. It's very clean, aesthetic, and there's very intuitive ways of interacting with the graph. So I put a text splitter in here, and I loaded this text file in here, the Epistles of George Fox. And it's just essentially a really big text file. I think it's some 300 pages, 3,000 lines. And we just chunked it, split it up in chunks of 1,000 characters, and then with a little bit of overlap, and this is fed into a vector store. So I'll have to rerun this graph because it's in memory, so it's no longer in memory. And we use some embeddings to translate essentially the tokens, they're not quite characters, into numeric arrays. And since we're using ChatGPT, it actually doesn't quite matter, I guess, what embedding provider we use, because we're going to retrieve that. We just have to have the same embedding provider. Now this font is getting a little bit blurry at this level. That's interesting. Starts to get fuzzy when you're zooming out. All right, but anyway. And this is a tool, so this is the cool part. We created a conversational agent that can access memories, tools, and it has its own memory. So we've got a little bit of chat history memory there. We're using OpenAI. We'll actually use ChatGPT 4.0. The results are better. And it can be a little bit creative. The temperature is not quite 0. And we get everything together. I believe deprecated next release changes to a new node tagged with new. Let's see if that'll help me with that. If I deprecating conversational retrieval. Okay, so we're gonna have to go to a new node tagged with new. Llama index. So by default it's built with LangChain, but it looks like they're porting a lot of these over into Llama index. We'll have to look at the difference between those. Change to a new node tagged with new. Okay, so it's probably the same node. Deprecating. Well, these are under agents, so let's see if we can find it. Tool agent, new. Okay, agent that uses a function calling to pick the tools and args to call. So it's similar interface, tool calling model. Buffer memory. And the retrieval tool. Then we get an agent executor. All right, so now I just need to get an API key. And we put that in to the credential. We'll edit the credential. And we'll save that. Excellent. Now, if I save this flow, and I think you don't have to compile or rebuild, you can just chat. But let me double check. So I need to upsert the vector database. We're going to pull in, we're going to follow the flow. So it's going to recursively split the text file with the George Fox epistles, and then it's going to use the embeddings and store them in our memory. We'll look at some other vector databases in upcoming sessions. The in-memory database isn't ideal. Okay, so that's one thing. So I need a text embedding model. So okay, we're going to have to take a look at I think I used I'll double check the project. All right, so I need to check my project and make sure we have access to, I think I was using DaVinci previously, but text embedding 3 large. All right, so I'll do this off screen. First project. I'll edit the models. Embedding models. Text embedding, small, large, and then I don't know how they compare, to be honest. Ada. So I'll just enable the 3 of them. We'll save that configuration and hopefully it'll take effect immediately. Easy. That is my model, so I just double checked that. I've had this problem previously where I make changes to the allowed models and it didn't seem to work. Yeah, so I have the DaVinci text embedding model. Okay, there we go. So just take a little bit of latency. Oh, wait a minute. I have another project here. Maybe that'll have more permissions. I don't understand this issue, to be honest. I have checked settings for this project. The limits, you go to project limit, and now I'm just using my default project. So, which is like the global project. So it looks like it's working now. So yeah, for some reason on sub project, I'm not able to, even though I select the models, it's not seeing that they should have access to that. There's like, this feels like a bug to me in the admin user interface. It's a bit tricky, but yeah, I could easily be doing something wrong. All right, so now what we do is we have these documents. There's 1,100 of them. And they have, each has like a source blob text. And then essentially in the source where it was located, so that you can cross-reference and get back to the knowledge base. All right, so now we should be able to chat. If I save, I've got these loaded in memory, and there's, I think, was there an indicator to show that everything is good? Let's just go ahead and chat. So one thing Flow had was streaming output. That can be nice, but it's not essential. We can just wait for the response. Now, in order to do streaming output, there's a setting which may be possible here, and I just haven't found that. Rate limiting, starter prompt, speech to text. Though, now that's something that Langflow didn't have. And you can set that up here. That's really nice. Chat feedback, allow domains, and then you can whitelist, so you can embed the chatbot in specific domains. So that's nice. Analyze, you can debug with these other tools, and lead capture. So it's even built for some sort of business processes. All right, so that's good. So we'll save this though. I didn't see a way to stream the output in the chat. Maybe there is, and I'm just not aware of it. So the interesting thing, there's a lot of categories of these sort of components. And so far, I've only delved into vector stores because I'm trying to do a retrieval-based graph here, where we have a document or a lot of knowledge and a lot of written literature and letters, and we want to kind of have an interface to interact with those and chat with those, such as these epistles of George Fox. But this could be anything. This could be an internal knowledge base for a company. And I know companies are turning to these quite a lot. At my work, I just got access today to a tool that searches across all of our internal knowledge sources, our communication channels, and things like that. Are really helpful for locating threads and cross-referencing docs. So one step in the direction of using a proper vector store would be to use this Chroma. It's an open source embedding database. It runs kind of locally, creates a SQLite. So that could be an improvement we'll make here. That way I don't have to run this, and every time I run the graph, I can persist it. And we will just see if I can. It looks like I can leave that blank. We'll just create a collection here, and it should just run it on my local host, and it'll output a retriever. So it will basically replace this. So the document will come from here. The embeddings are OpenAI again, embeddings, and it's pretty affordable to honestly to run these embeddings in the ChatGPT 4.0. In my experiments, I'm not using it extensively, but I'm only spending about 3 cents a day. We're not in any kind of production environment with this, but yeah, it's not cost prohibitive to start experimenting with these. I take that with a grain of salt though, so we did encounter some issues where cost can be a barrier to accessing the tools. So wait a minute, let me see here. So we got a retriever tool. Okay. Yes, sorry, I need to pay more attention. That'll come here. And you can only have one retriever, so I have to remove this Chroma retriever, the memory retriever, and plug in the Chroma retriever. Interesting. So these Moonlight as a vector store and a retriever, which is a good point. see how this works, but basically sometimes you have a subgraph for splitting, parsing, and embedding, creating your embeddings. And you'll just run that and you'll upsert that. And in that use flow, it would be a vector store. And you give it a record name. And we'll see if I can upsert this now into the chroma store. Let's just see if it works. All right. Graph current node is not iterable. Error vector service upsert vector. So, oops. And that's sort of an opaque error. I could try this whole flow, put that back in place, and try upserting now. But what I suspect we'll need to do. So does that mean Chrome is not running, or that I'm using it wrong? It's a bit tricky, isn't it, to decipher that opaque error. I'm using the same interface, and I'm just swapping in a new vector store. So it should kind of, in my expectation, is that it should just behave the same. But it could be that, you know, there's an underlying error that's being suppressed by this very vague error, and it could be this, that I don't have a credential. Only needed if you have a chroma on the cloud service with XAPI key. So I shouldn't need that credential, right? Keep track of the record to prevent duplication. Okay, so this is where upsert will be useful. And I'll have to look at how to do a record manager. But first I would need to be able to input my document. So this outputs either a document, array of document objects containing metadata and page, or concatenated string from page constant documents. So that could be part of the problem. I'm not sure what it means by not iterable. And I still think this should be a vector store, and I should be able to upsert to it. Graph current node not iterable. Error vectors service upsert vector. So opaque. So here's the FlowiseAI docs. You got embeddings. So, okay. If you're running both FlowiseAI and Chroma on Docker, there are additional steps involved. So prerequisite, download, install Docker and get clone Chroma. Okay, this is the problem. Yeah. It's probably just unable to initialize Chroma. Now this is one thing that actually just worked out of the box with Langflow. Langflow was able to just start Chroma running in the background via the Python library. So, okay, that's probably easily remedied. With the defaults. I could consider here for a moment if we want to use Chroma. Or I do have already another account with a vector store. So let's just check their vector stores. We got Astra's one I do have an account with already. And I haven't done extensive research in comparing these. I started with the in-memory one because it was the simplest. And the pricing is a factor. I like the pricing where you kind of pay per, in this case, pay per query. When it's cheap, when it's only you get some 10,000 queries per cent or something like that. And not all of them have that pricing model, and there's a lot of them, aren't there? Okay, well let's try it instead. Let's do Astra, so I don't have to have a service running locally. We'll come back to this. But okay, so we got the same the document here. This needs to be a document instead. All right, there we go with that. the embeddings here, and then I'll need my credentials because this is a cloud service. So I can just delete this or hit that. Here we go. And now we'll send an Astra retriever. So I guess you can have the whole graph in any case, and it knows to upsert and use the retriever. So let's create a new credential, Astra DB API, token, and endpoint. All right, so I'm going to do this off screen real quick. One moment. But it's just astra.datastacks.com. It's a NoSQL and Vector DB for generative AI. And it's really convenient, real simple to use, and pretty cheap, pretty affordable. So I'm just going to sign in here and grab my credentials. And I essentially have created an Astra account and an Astra DB, and I've pre-populated it previously with these vectors. Now, it'll be curious when I upsert if it's going to, how it's going to keep track of the ones I've already inserted. So we'll take a look at that in a moment. Let me just grab my credentials here. And you can deploy your Astra DB in various regions. So I'm just grabbing the DB URL and the token. Okay, so we added the credential here. And I've got my namespace is George Fox Epistles. Oh, wait. So no, namespace. What's the namespace? That's a bit different. I have a collection. But I didn't really set up a namespace. Huh. Maybe the namespace, there's a key space. Maybe that's what they mean. Yeah, namespace, default key space. Okay, got it. Yeah, okay, that was subtle. But that lets you organize your collections. You can have multiple knowledge bases vectorized and continually updating, things like that. So let's see if we can now upsert these. Currently I have 1,500 of these. So this is the same problem. It's not iterable. Okay, so I think it's coming from this retriever tool trying to access it. No. So I'll have to go back and check. Let's watch a tutorial on this. Oh, they do have streaming, but when the final node is a chain or a tool agent. Okay, well I do have a tool agent in the final node. And I would like it to stream into their little default chat, but okay. But this is how to stream into your own client. Okay, that's cool. We'll do that later. Let's get this vector store working though, hey? For your augmented generation, you set a document store, you click plus. They're doing, okay, so you get your document source, you load that in there, you split it. We're using a recursive text splitter. A lot of this is tracking with what we've already got. Just open these side by side here. So it is really user friendly and beginner friendly, but at the same time, you know, there's still a learning curve to it for sure. Okay, so they're saying having a bigger overlap in that case might be good. That makes sense, but it just means more data. But yeah, let's do that. Let's do like 350. Let's split it. Oops, 350. Yeah, so can you preview the data? So preview chunks. If I just go, no, this is different. They're actually creating a document store here. Document stores. Interesting. Now this is actually where it starts to get really powerful though. You can pull in documents from a lot of different locations. In fact, what we're doing right now is compiling an open source GitHub repository of markdown documents that we're going to be building some agent flows around. But yeah, so you can use Notion. That's one of my favorites. Gitbook. We have Confluence docs. A lot of organizations are using those. Right now I just have a text file. So let's just start with that. Plain text is what I've got. Wow. Actually, it's a text file. I see, so I could paste in some text or load a big text file. Let's try that one out. And you can search Google using a couple of these providers. Now, this is one where the pricing is just a bit prohibitive. Okay, so we're going to upload the file here, and it's just in the same directory. Choose file to upload. So code. And we are not Langflow today, we are Flowise today, and I have this text file right here. 800 kilobytes of text, and I'll preview the chunks. So yeah, so 800,000 characters, it's a big text. It's showing items, and I guess then I can use, they say recursive character splitter, chunk size, and then 200. I'll go with the defaults there. Now we got 1149 chunks. Okay, so we'll process this. All right. Options, preview and process, view and edit chunks, or delete. Okay, now I've got that. We got our document loaded and stored. Again, I think we can, in this collection, load other documents. So, and in fact, we have more text files like this. This is part 2 of this huge collection of these. So that we've got working chunk size, previewing the data, loaded in, processed, and then add the document store to your flow. Okay. Now that your data set is ready to be upserted, it's time to go to your RAG, chat flow, and agent flow and add the document store node. Upsert your dataset to a vector store. Checking the green box in the corner of your. We used Upstash vector store. You know, I've never heard of them. Again, this is all new to me. Let's just check them out. Upstash. Check out Upstash. Serverless data platform. Vector. Create an index. Pricing is what I'm after. Pay as you go. This is essentially what I'm looking for. In this case, pay as you go makes sense. Per 100,000 commands. 2 cents. Max commands per second is very fast. Even then, they give you a pretty gracious free tier. But here's the problem: you get really quick. The jump in price is just like huge. But actually, this is what I want to pay as you go. Okay, for $60 a month, consistent loads with predictable costs. Daily query update limit 1 million. Interesting. Why this is unlimited? Oh, and pay as you go. Why, I guess, per 100,000 requests. 2 billion. Ooh. We only need about that many dimensions, but okay. So I might try it, but right now I already have the Astra. So we're gonna see if I can slot that in there. So this chat text again. So let's see, how did they do it? Okay, so they got a document stored, and you feed it into vector database, which is then fed to a retriever tool. So we have everything wired up pretty much, but they're using retriever upstash. So they're returning the retriever. That's correct. So retriever will plug in here. Yeah, the output is retriever. That makes sense. And then they're using the API embeddings, but the difference is I don't need these two parts, and I don't need the splitter because we already did that in a separate flow, and that's kind of cool. Then your document store can be used. You separate out the splitting from the graph, simplifies your code, but we need to add the document store node. Just seeing where it would make sense. Document store under document loaders makes sense. The new one. Select our store. George Fox Epistles will return documents to the document input, and then can I insert? Okay, we get a different error then. Vector service vector observer error command create collection failed with following errors. Request invalid field command Not valid problem. Function can only be dot product cosine or including error code command field invalid. So this is our similarity metric. Request dot product cosine or Euclidean. Man. And I think the default was cosine. Did I spell it correctly? It should give me a select like this, Similarity top K. When I delete it, right? It's showing cosine as the default. Here they don't even really give you that upstash. Doesn't give you the parameter, so in effect it's simpler. Well, hitting the button again is not going to help. Wait, if I save chat flow. Yeah, I was sort of getting these vibes with Langflow also. It's just things that just seem like it should work properly. It's plugging wires together and using default values. It just seems like it should work if I leave it alone. It doesn't work. It's just really frustrating. I mean, I know I'm learning here, so I expect that I'm going to make mistakes. And we'll be glad to accept when I'm making a mistake, and correct that mistake. But I don't know how I could correct this. It doesn't seem like I'm making a mistake here. I don't know. Okay, let's see if I can get this upstash to work. It's got good pricing. And yeah, I don't think this is inherently a problem with Astra. I think this is a problem with FlowiseAI. So I'm just going to set up a database. And I selected the free plan so far. I'm going to put it in Germany. Eviction enable to evict entries when max data is reached. And then the free plan, you can select your region, which is nice. Astra doesn't give you that on their free plan. You get a 10,000 command limit, which is pretty a lot. And then the pay-as-you-go is 2 per 100,000. Now, am I setting up? Oh, I need to set up a vector store. Vector index. Okay, so this one is a bit more limited on the vector stores. They only allow you US East 1, Ireland, US, EU West 1, and then Google Cloud Platform, US Central. That's why I've seen US Central is really popular. I don't have a specific preference here. And then it asks for the embedding model. For automatically generating embeddings, see documentation. Okay, and then you select, actually here you select the similarity metric when you create the data store. So that's one thing. 1536 cosine similarity dimensions in a cosine similarity metric. I'll start with the free plan. It's going to give us 10,000 updates, 10,000 queries, and we're only looking at around daily, and we're only looking at around, I think it was 1,500 updates. I'll create this. And it's not super sensitive information on the screen here, but anyway, I'll just set this up off screen. So we're going to remove the Astra one. We're going to add Upstash. And I got Redis and vector. So we're using the vector here. And I'll need to add my credentials. We'll create new, and I'll just pop that over here. Upstash vector API. I mean, overall, I'm like pretty excited by these tools. The FlowiseAI and both Langcode. I mean, they're decent, and the interface is coming along quite a lot. So I have more positives to say about them than negatives. Sometimes I just get a bit frustrated, you know, as we do when we're working with technology in general. Okay, so we've got our little credentials there. So this is going to be a little bit simpler graph. Now we've got our documents coming in here, and then our embedding model. Now I might have made a mistake here. I didn't specify the embedding type when I made the Upstash vector store. Hopefully it'll I just said custom. So in a way I chose custom. OpenAI embeddings didn't seem like it was in the list, and I didn't notice. So hopefully that won't be an issue. If it is, then I'll figure it out. Here's the retriever, and add document store, load PDF, retrieval splitter, preview the data, process the data, add the document store to the node, upsert your data to a vector store. So they kind of gloss over that part, understandably. They don't want to give a tutorial on how Upstash works. This is a Flowise tutorial. Okay, so hopefully it'll work. Let's just try it. It's not iterable. This is the confusing one. Okay. I have pretty much the same graph as they're showing here. I'm just double checking this, seeing what else. If there's some downstream error, but so the chat output goes to the tool. Let's see. So yeah, essentially this tool agent, and that's the terminal node of the graph. So they're just out of order a little bit here. That's not a big deal. But it's receiving a buffer memory. They're using a buffer window memory. Uses a window of size k to surface the last k back and forth uses memory. All right, maybe it's a little more advanced. Interesting. So let's try that as the memory. We'll delete that one. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, we have just a memory. So like looking left to right, we got a document store that's taking the epistles. It's returning a document. We've got our upstash vector, which is receiving that document. It's also receiving embeddings from OpenAI embeddings, which we have here, OpenAI embeddings. So this whole part is the same. Then we have a buffer window memory and a retriever tool, the new one. And those are both being fed into a tool agent. So this tool agent actually is getting three things. It's getting tools to use, which I can put these in the same order as the thing, like this. Retriever tool, buffer memory, and the agent, right? So I've got to be doing something wrong. One other idea I can do is build this from scratch. Let me check again in Visual Studio Code. I think I don't know if it actually did update it, but we get a little bit more here in the trace back. But it's pretty opaque, to be honest. Create collection failed with following errors. Measure request failed. Metric. No, this is our earlier one. Can only be dot product cosine Euclidean. That was the previous message. So this is essentially the trace back here. All right. And I can copy this and see if anyone is discussing this in the FlowiseAI GitHub. For example, if there's an issue already open about it. Nobody. So that's kind of weird, right? Not implemented. It's a different error. Intermediate value is not iterable, cannot read property of undefined. This is cool. It's got a built-in web scraper though. And there is a bug fix for this, but it's, I don't think, relating to what I'm having, the issue I'm having. Yeah, it's kind of weird. All right, and I've got this error in multiple vector stores. So this is, and there's no other people reporting this one. So that usually tells me I'm doing something wrong, which is fine. You know, we make mistakes and I'm learning. That's the time when we make the most mistakes. But I'd like to figure out what that mistake is. Okay, and from what I can tell, retriever tool, retriever name. Yeah, it's a bit different. They're using underscores. You have a description. Return source documents is off. Okay, but this is downstream. That is subtle. Was that the problem? Well, it looks like it's doing something. Let's see if I can check over here. In any case, it was an interesting. Yeah, we got 106 kilobytes in storage now. Yeah, we're starting to get data flowing in. So it was an interesting mistake I was making. Somehow it was preserved. Let's see. I added this tool. It was a default setting of the retriever tool. I can't remember the exact steps I took. If I already had the retriever tool in this graph and I've only been working around it, or if I added that and it was default. But that error really didn't tell me what to look at. That was sort of a very opaque error. You have to kind of understand the inner workings of this, and particularly the downstream node. It was pointing me to the vector node, but it was a toggle I needed to make on the. It's pointing me here to the vector node, and it was a toggle I needed to make on the retrieval tool. Anyway, that's the way of the gun, I think. With sometimes tech, we don't always have clear indications of what's wrong, or even what went wrong. Sometimes we just gotta figure out how to fix it, and jiggle handles and toggle switches and stuff. Like, I still don't know exactly what the error is. I don't understand why it broke, but that seems to fix it because now I have data streaming in. Data browser. No, actually I don't have records yet. Interesting. Vector service invalid, vector dimension 3072, expected 15. Okay. We're getting closer. So yes, I did configure this 1536 vector dimension based on prior reading that OpenAI uses this one. But now somehow I'm getting 3072. So how do I change this? Invalid vector. So they received 3072 and expected 1536. And it's here that's happening. So it has to have been here. So I think if I save this and I go back to my document store, I did something wrong here when I split this. So let's check the settings here. Is it necessarily? Where is this setting in my OpenAI embeddings node? You know what it might be? It might be the model that I'm using. The large one might be using the 3072. The large embedding model might be using a dimension of 3072. So if I use a small embedding model, or DaVinci is the one I used prior, maybe Ada, we'll have a 1536 length. That would have been nice to have gotten earlier, and before waiting for like 5 minutes for this whole flow to run. Also, in some helpful text, I was like saying, check your your embedding provider model. I don't know. Some models use such and such. So like a little bit of a higher level abstract description of what went wrong. Let's try the small one. I suppose the small. This is a guess. And we'll wait 5 minutes. So there's gotchas. We've encountered a couple. Another gotcha. So I could have, now that I know this is an issue, when I created the vector store, I think I chose the vector length, and I went with the default. I went with the default vector length, 1536. I had seen that one prior. And there's probably use cases for bigger vector length. It depends on the type of document you're scanning and retrieving, and the context window of your large language model. Like how much you can fit into the conversation flow. And I think that's why the smaller one is more common and conventional right now. So I think we're good. I think this is going to be the fix. I think we'll have some data. Okay, so 334 megs bandwidth, storage 106 kilobytes. Maybe I can see something coming in there now if I refresh. Nope, still the data browser is empty. Usage. Oh, I have a query. I made 2 queries today. Oh, we got some updates. Okay, when I hover over it. I'm sorry, I'm reading stuff off screen. I'll just show you. This is a pretty cool interface. Hopefully there's not too much sensitive information here. We go to the data browser. There's no records yet, though. That's what I'm waiting on. But we do have some usage, and there's some of that stuff, and API keys, the sensitive part. 106 kilobytes storage, updates 0. 4 of 10,000 queries have been used. So that's just essentially what I'm looking at. I'm in a vector store, and I might be able to change the settings, or when you create the vector store, at least I think it'll let you select the vector length. All right, nope, same problem. So let me see here. I think this problem is with my model, with the embedding model. And so if we read the docs here, for their embedding models, I would just like a table of them. I'm going to try Ada just while I'm reading in the background. That's one of their original ones, but I've actually used not Ada before. The other one is Da Vinci. So we'll try Ada. We'll save. That could be a factor too. If I have to save the flow and then try the upstart again. So well, let's try it again and read about these embeddings a little bit. Cosine similarity search, k-nearest, models, small, indexing and process, vector count is increasing. Yes. Now we're good to go. Vector length. I saw one, 1536. By default, the length of embedding or vector will be 1536, text embedding 3 small, or 3072, text embedding 3 large. Okay, you can reduce the dimension of the embedding by the dimensions parameter. So that's strange. So yeah, we're in the right ballpark. 1536 though. This maybe it's because I didn't save it. Text embedding 3 small. So okay, that's another thing. You have to save the flow perhaps. Let me check over on the screen. Do we have data yet? We do have some updates. 1149 in fact. So it like posted all the data. Okay, so probably the error I made was to change the there we go, success. Added 1149 of them. So we're gonna do it. So I think the mistake I made, one is I went with the default vector length. So going with the defaults is usually not a mistake, but the mistake I made was going with the default here, which was text embedding 3 large, which is not the same vector length. I did switch to text embedding 3 small, but I think I didn't hit save, and I tried upserting again. So these changes don't take effect, I believe, until you hit save. And then I switched to Ada and did the upsert, and everything worked. All right, so next time I'll try the small, try and see if it works. But basically now we have vectors in the database, so we can See the data browser? You know, it's the same thing locally. It has all these vectors, these numerical representations of content. And the lines in the source, which it would be nice to mention which, if we have multiple documents, we're parsing which document this came from. I think in a knowledge-based context, you would want to know, based on your result, where did you find this information? What article can I refer to? You know, cite your sources is essentially what we're after. I believe that's what this is for, but blob, it seems kind of generic. Maybe I'll learn more about that in the future. But okay, now we've got some stuff, some vector data. And another mistake I made today was when working with Chroma, I had to have the Docker service running, so my Chroma database would run locally. All right, which wasn't an issue with LangFlow. It was able to run it locally for me without even using Docker. I don't know the difference. But we should now be able to chat with these epistles. So what I can do, we'll just load these all into one window here, and I'll go over here, and I'm just going to load this big old text here. It's huge. I'm going to pick a random thing. Brittle spirits, peevish. And I'll say something like, wrong button, chat. What does George Fox say about peevish and brittle spirit? Something really deep into the text. All right. So we will say, George Fox addresses the issue of peevish, short, and brittle spirits in his writings with a call for unity and spiritual diligence. Here's an excerpt from the epistles on the topic, which all, so I think that's where we're at, by which all peevish, short, and brittle spirits may be kept down. Yep, found it. So that all may have their good conversation in Christ Jesus, striving for unity in the Spirit and the holy faith that giveth and keepeth victory over the enemy. And so that all may have a care for their minds running into the earth and carnal things, for the carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. And let all take heed of neglecting the gift of God, but stir up the pure mind in one another. And the Lord with his eternal arm and power preserve you diligent in his heavenly work and service in his vineyard, that it may not grow over with briars, thorns, and thistles to choke the tender plants. Fox emphasizes the importance of maintaining a good conversation in Christ Jesus and striving for unity in the Spirit and faith. He warns against allowing one's mind to become preoccupied with earthly and carnal things, and encourages believers to stir up the pure mind in one another. He also highlights the importance of being diligent to God's work and service to prevent spiritual neglect and decay. So this is interesting. In this, George Fox was writing in this, like the 1600s, and it's part of a research project I'm working on. He was a founding member of the Quakers Religious Society of Friends, and so it's kind of interesting to use kind of earthly and carnal things, these large language models, to investigate the writings of like a 16th century religious figure, and then to cast those writings in a new light, bring them for continuing revelation, and sort of see how the modern sensibility and the modern philosophy of Quakers, reflects these original teachings. Yeah, so it's kind of an inquiry, and I'm using the large language model as a way of helping to access this text. It's even difficult for me to read and understand the writing style, for example. So it's able to help me interpret the writings, and then we can say, how would How would we interpret that in a modern sense, more ecumenical or even interfaith context of unprogrammed friends? Quakers will say. Because I think in certain Quaker lineage, there's this interfaith and ecumenical approach where we realize that there's not one source of divine wisdom, and that wisdom wasn't just dispensed at one point in time and sort of cease, and all of our explorations are based on this historic canonical text, but rather that this wisdom, it comes from many sources, many traditions, and is continually being revealed and revised. So that's sort of my interest in finding these kind of common threads, and using even modern technology as one of those ways of continuing revelation. It's not black and white, and we're kind of exploring this concept of how, technology serves our communities and our goals, and the also how it harms our communities as well. So we want to be engaged, but not accelerationist and not perhaps Luddite. So more in the middle, using discernment. Interpreting George Fox's writings in a contemporary ecumenical and interfaith Quaker context involves translating his 17th century language and concerns into principles that resonate with today's diverse and inclusive Quaker communities. Here's how we might approach this. Yeah, because I could barely understand it, honestly. Emphasis on unity and spiritual diligence. Original text, all striving for unity in the spirit and a holy faith that giveth and keepeth victory over the enemy. Contemporary interpretation. In today's context, this can be understood as a call for unity and mutual support with the Quaker community and beyond, including interfaith and ecumenical efforts. I'll also mention earth care. There's a lot of contemporary concern for the impact of our lifestyles on the planet and the habitability of our ecosystems. So earth care, so our perspective is increasingly shifting beyond like the human community, into realizing back to the realization that we are part of a tapestry of nature, and kind of even seeking sort of indigenous wisdom and other sources that have recognized that for many generations. Yeah, so these are all things I'm learning about, and I'm glad to have a tool that can help me sort of in this process of discernment and discovery. Avoiding earthly distractions, though. So fostering an environment of cooperation and understanding. But yeah, so you can see how this can really help me deeply dive into the text that I'm in discourse with. And it was fairly easy to build in retrospect. There were some gotchas along the way, some landmines. But what I'll do is I'll just make a short recap of what we did today and what worked, that people can use as a recipe to build, their own knowledge chats. Basically, you're chatting with some documented knowledge. It could be a video transcript. It could be documents in Confluence Wiki for your organization. It's pretty powerful, and you can see how it can really help you explore and revise your understanding. So I'll take a quick break, and I'll recap this session today. Hello, let's take a quick look at what we achieved in today's live code session where we built a retrieval application using FlowiseAI and the OpenAI large language model. Flowise is an open source tool for rapidly prototyping large language model applications. And in today's session, I took a large document. It's some 300 pages or 3,000 lines of text that I want to explore and interpret. It was written mostly in the 1600s, so it's really difficult to read. It's called the Epistles of George Fox. But you could use this same approach on any knowledge source you have. It could be video transcripts of like a 2 or 3 hour video course, anything you want to kind of interrogate and ask questions and ask for interpretations. And so let's see how this works. This is just a plain text file, but there's actually a lot of different types of files we can use. And I'm using Upstash, the vector database. And I'll show you, this is the result of the vectorization. We took those epistles and we vectorized them, and that just means we converted the text into these numeric vectors. And each vector has the number, the numeric array or vector, and the original text, so you can cross-reference that. And I believe there's a way you can cite the source, like it shows me which lines that came from. And I might even be able to know the text file or article, for example, if you have a Confluence database or YouTube videos. And to do that, we use the OpenAI embeddings. And I ended up using, I tried several models. There was a couple of gotchas. I won't explain too much about the struggles, but I will highlight the nuances while we look at this flow. But here's the flow. It's actually pretty straightforward. We'll take one quick step back though. Before that, here's the Flowise front page. We actually, as a first step, create a document store. And I created a document store locally called George Fox Epistles, and it's being used in one flow here. It has almost 900,000 characters, and it's been split into about 1,000 chunks. It comes from a text file. These flows can be, they consist of document loaders, and they can come from many sources, you know, Airtable, database, Confluence documents, CSVs, docx's, web scraping results, GitHub repositories, Notion. It's really powerful. PDF files. So almost anywhere you can store text-based knowledge. You know, again, YouTube video transcripts is another example. You can just copy and paste it or take those files here, even web search results. So it's quite diverse. And all I did was just add a text file, which is the text file I showed a moment ago, and we ran it through a chunking splitter, and essentially that looks like this. You upload the file, which I've done already, and it has a few settings. We use a recursive character text splitter. We split it into chunks of a certain size, so about 1,000 characters here, and they should have some overlap, some degree of overlap. It depends on the structure of your knowledge, the amount of overlap you would want. But you know, around 20 to 40% is probably good. The tutorial I was following, they had a 70% overlap, or around 700 characters of these chunks. That would give you more, if you're wanting to have more text around your search results, it's using a similarity search. So you find a string in this big text, you'll have more overlap, will give you larger, I think, results and multiple results for the same text, because it would be appearing in multiple chunks. But that has the trade-off of that you're sending more data to the large language model. So your LLM context window increases in size, your requests are larger, and it would have more, it'd be more resource intensive, and you might even exceed the context window. So tuning this should be done carefully, but going with the defaults is what I did in most cases, with the chunk size of 100, and I think I changed the overlap to 200, but it was something like 1 or 200. Yes, so that's it, and we can preview the chunks here, and this is just chunking data. It's not vectorizing yet. At this point, we have it split up into a bunch to 1,149 chunks of text. And it might be a way to annotate additional metadata, such as the file name. Well, I'll have to look into that later because I would like to cross-reference these and ask which epistle can I refer to, or which document that citation comes from. So here's the flow, and it starts over here. We just have a document store, and we selected that George Fox epistles document store. This is the FlowiseAI document store, and we're using the OpenAI embeddings here. This was one of the gotchas I had. The default choice here was text embedding 3 large, but the default when I configured this unstash vector database was to use a vector size, I think it was 1100 or 1536. This was the default. It may have asked me for that. I usually just go with default values, but it turns out the default choice for the OpenAI embeddings component in FlowiseAI is text embedding 3 large, which is like twice as big as the default vector length, which led to some errors. So we have to be careful. Either, if I go for the default vector length here, which affects my search results, then I need to select a smaller model here. So I believe you can select text embedding 3. I read the docs. It says text embedding 3 has that length. And I ended up using text embedding Ada, but I think either of those should work. Make sure you save. Every time you make a significant change, like to one of these parameters, make sure you save before you try to upsert the documents. There was another gotcha there. These don't auto-save. Okay, so we passed those embeddings to the upstash vector, and I just passed in my credentials here. You can get those credentials when you configure the database. Upstash, we're not going to look so much into that part of the process. And we have documents and embeddings, and this record manager is useful if you want to re-upsert a document that continues to change, like Confluence pages, for example. They're under continuous revision, but it might be that only a few lines changed, and you don't want to put all those original lines in the database. So you will need a record manager. We're not using that here because this was like a one-off upsert. I'm actually just inserting it. I'm not going to be upserting it. Great. Now that's going to return. It's going to output a retriever. You can also output the vector store for further processing, perhaps. I'm not sure. But the default is to return a retriever. So we feed that into a retriever tool. And a tool is just what essentially an agent can be configured to use. They can be tools that retrieve text and feed it into a prompt. They can be tools that do calculations or call other APIs. So these tool using agents are what makes these large language model applications more powerful and gives them capabilities beyond just text generation. They can do searches and even perhaps interact with services like creating hotel bookings and things like that when you get more advanced. So the tool agent takes in a number of tools that it can use, and in the conversation determines which is the appropriate tool to respond with. We're going to use a bit of memory so it remembers the conversation, it remembers what we've talked about and what it has said and what I've said. So we use a buffer window memory here. And then we're using OpenAI, but this FlowiseAI has quite a number of large language models that it supports. So if you have a preference, you might be working with a local Ollama model or something deployed on Hugging Face, for example. There's quite a number of them, and some that aren't even listed here, like Anthropic, Claude. Cohere is a Canadian company. Interesting. So I'm just familiar with OpenAI, and in our model, we're going to use the GPT-4o, which is very fast and relatively cheap. So this whole project is only running me probably around 10 cents a day, and it's all usage based. If I don't use it one day to the next, it won't charge me anything. Now I'm only toying with it, so my usage could increase if we were to put it in like a more production oriented environment. But nonetheless, you can get quite far in experimenting with only a few cents. That can be a barrier though. You have to have a key in order to get the OpenAI API key. You need to put a credit card on file and things like that. So it's not completely free, unfortunately. But that's why there are options there which might work for for everyone, such as running them locally. But just keep in mind, everything has a cost. If you're running the model locally, even though the model itself is free, you're going to be paying the cost in your CPU and RAM usage and the type of computer you will need to acquire. So even then, it's going to cost something. There are resources involved, and I prefer to use managed resources, so I don't pay the cost in my time for managing and configuring things. But it's all trade-offs, so it's personal choice. But that's about it. So the tool agent gets these. There was one gotcha here that, let's see if I can find that. I was getting an error. I should have mentioned this on the retriever tool. Make sure return source documents is off when you're plugging this into the tools agent. I think it's on by default. And when I did that, I was getting a really opaque error that would pop up down here saying it could not iterate over it said like the vector store was not iterable or something. It was pointing me, the error text was pointing me towards this thing, but I had to come over to the retriever and I toggle a switch. I don't understand why or what exactly the error meant, but those are the two biggest hurdles I faced in this process. In hindsight, things work well and it's fairly simple, but these hurdles and opaque error messages can completely derail your process. And it could be, even though it's a small thing to toggle a switch, if you don't know to toggle it, there's this gap. You're so close but so far from the solution. So there's some usability improvement I think that could be made in terms of the error messages offering suggestive corrective actions and being more relevant. Let's take a quick look at it though now. So we have a chat now, and essentially you can go full or like a large screen with your chat. FlowiseAI gives you a real quick interface to interact with your documents. And in particular, I'm doing some research on an author again, George Fox, who was writing letters called epistles in the 1600s. He was the founder of the Religious Society of Friends. He emphasized the importance of direct personal experience of God, advocating for inward spiritual journey over external rituals and clergy. He taught that the inner light, or the presence of God within each person, is accessible to all, guiding them towards truth and righteousness. Fox called for simplicity, integrity, and equality, rejecting social hierarchies and advocating for peace and justice. His teachings encouraged communal worship in silence, where individuals could speak as moved by the Spirit, fostering a deep sense of spiritual community and mutual support. So that's actually very succinct and kind of just helping me understand some wisdom and perspective from a person writing so many centuries ago. And this tool can be useful for any other type of knowledge that you may be interested in exploring and having a discourse with, in a way, a conversation with that knowledge. All right. Well, thanks for your time. I hope you're doing well, and have a great day.